a causeway across a lake 4 horsemen wide, running straight out over the water toward a city of 250,000 people.
And walking up it, in November 1519, are about 400 exhausted Spaniards who have never seen anything remotely like what's in front of them.
Canals, aqueducts, pyramids painted white and red catching the sun, floating gardens, a market that one of them later swears was larger than anything in Europe.
And coming down the causeway to meet them is the man who rules all of it, carried because his feet are not permitted to touch the ground.
Montezuma II, and within 2 years that city is rubble, that lake is being filled in, and the empire is gone.
And the standard story is that he thought Cortés was a god and froze, which is, let's be blunt, mostly a later invention.
Right. Almost all of that comes from sources written decades afterward by people with an obvious interest in the story.
Either Spaniards justifying a conquest or Mexican nobles explaining to their new rulers why the old ruler failed.
So let's do the harder version, because what actually happened is stranger and much more human than a man mistaking a soldier for a deity.
Start with what the Aztec Empire actually was, because that's where the answer lives.
First, it wasn't really an empire in the way Rome was. It's a tribute system, 3 allied cities at the center, Tenochtitlan being the dominant one.
And they don't conquer and administer, they conquer and invoice. You keep your king, your gods, your customs. You send cotton, feathers, cacao, gold, maize, and people.
Which is efficient. It's also the fatal design flaw, and we'll come back to that.
The city itself is genuinely extraordinary, built on an island in Lake Texcoco, founded around 1325 on what was, essentially, swamp nobody else wanted.
Chinampas, the raised garden beds in the lake, producing multiple harvests a year, fresh water piped in from Chapultepec by aqueduct.
Street sweepers, public latrines, human waste collected and sold as fertilizer and for tanning. It was cleaner than Madrid.
Population estimates run from 150,000 to 250,000, bigger than any city in Spain.
And Montezuma takes the throne in 1502. Now, he's not a hereditary king in our sense. He's elected by a council of nobles from the royal lineage.
And he'd been a priest and a successful war leader before that. He was not a passive man. He expanded the empire further than anyone before him.
He also did something politically dangerous. He centralized hard.
Purged the court of officials appointed by his predecessor, elevated the hereditary nobility, sidelined commoners who'd risen through military merit.
Which had worked before. A commoner could rise by taking captives in war. He shut that ladder.
So by 1519, he is a strong ruler at the head of a resentful structure, powerful and simultaneously more brittle than he knows.
And the resentment outside the capital is the thing that decides this whole story. Tribute was heavy, and it included people for sacrifice.
Which we should be precise about because it gets used as cartoon. Human sacrifice was a real, central public institution, thousands of victims, mostly war captives.
And that shaped how they fought. The Mexica way of war prioritized taking prisoners alive, capture over kill.
Which, against an enemy trying to kill you as fast as possible, is a catastrophic handicap.
Now, the Omens, because the sources list them and they're worth handling honestly.
A comet, the temple of Huitzilopochtli catching fire, Lake Texcoco flooding without a storm, a bird brought to Montezuma with a mirror in its head in which he sees warriors.
All recorded after the conquest, every single one.
Which doesn't mean nobody saw a comet. It means the list got assembled afterward by people making sense of a catastrophe.
Every culture does it. The disaster happens, and then the memory obligingly produces the warnings.
And the Quetzalcoatl story, the returning god arriving from the east in the right year, is almost certainly the same thing, retrofitted.
So then, Cortés lands, April 1519, near what becomes Veracruz. Around 500 men, 16 horses, a few cannon.
And he immediately does 2 things that tell you exactly who he's dealing with.
He scuttles his own ships so nobody can go back, and he starts collecting allies.
And the allies are the entire war. This is the part that gets buried under the story of Spanish steel.
The Totonacs at Zempoala are paying tribute they hate. Cortés arrives and asks how they'd feel about not paying it.
And then Tlaxcala, which is the big one, an independent state that had been fighting the Mexica for generations and had never been conquered.
They fight the Spaniards first, hard. Cortés nearly dies there. And then they calculate that this strange small army is the lever they've been waiting for.
Thousands of Tlaxcalan warriors join him. By the time this ends, the army marching on Tenochtitlan is overwhelmingly indigenous.
This was not 400 Spaniards conquering an empire. This was a regional revolt against Mexica tribute with Spanish shock troops attached.
And there's a person in the middle of it who matters more than most of the soldiers, Malintzin, La Malinche.
A Nahua woman given to the Spanish as a slave, who spoke both Nahuatl and Maya, working with a shipwrecked Spaniard who spoke Maya and Spanish.
A two-stage translation chain. And she learns Spanish fast and becomes the direct voice of the negotiation.
Every message Montezuma receives from Cortés passes through her judgment about what to say and how to say it.
Then Cholula, on the road to the capital, in a city that's an ally of the Mexica, Cortés claims he's discovered an ambush plot.
And his men kill thousands of unarmed nobles and civilians in the courtyard of the temple precinct.
The plot may have been real. It may have been supplied by the Tlaxcalans, who hated Cholula.
Either way, the message travels ahead of him, and it's the message he wanted sent.
So now, the meeting on the causeway.
And here's my honest read on Montezuma's strategy, because I do think he had one.
Go on.
He'd been sending embassies for months, with gifts, gold, worked feather pieces, ceremonial objects, and the standard reading is appeasement or awe.
But in Mexica diplomacy, an overwhelming gift is a display of power. It says, look what I can casually give away. Consider what I could spend on an army.
And the Spaniards read it as, there's more where that came from.
A complete failure of translation on both sides, in the one exchange that mattered.
And then letting them into the city, which everyone calls his great blunder. I'm not sure it was irrational.
Make the case.
In the open field, they have horses and cannon and space. Inside the city, on causeways he controls, surrounded by his own people, they're 400 men in a jar.
He can cut the causeways. He can cut the water. He can starve them out without a battle.
It's a containment strategy, and it very nearly works.
And then it doesn't, because within a week, the Spanish take him hostage inside his own palace.
And he cooperates. He keeps governing, keeps giving orders, with Spaniards in the room.
Which is the thing his own nobility cannot forgive. A living captive ruler is worse than a dead one, because he legitimizes the captors with every order he gives.
Then Cortés has to leave the city, because the governor of Cuba has sent an expedition to arrest him.
So he marches out, defeats that force, recruits most of them, and comes back with a bigger army, which is an astonishing piece of nerve.
And while he's away, the officer he left in charge massacres the Mexican nobility during a religious festival in the temple precinct.
Unarmed, dancing, at a ceremony the Spaniards had approved. Hundreds killed, including most of the political leadership of the city.
And that ends any possibility of a negotiated anything.
The city rises. Cortés returns into a war, and the Spaniards push Montezuma up onto a roof to calm the crowd.
And the crowd stones him. Spanish accounts say he died of those wounds 3 days later.
Indigenous accounts say the Spanish killed him when he was no longer useful, and his body was found with stab wounds, according to some sources.
We don't know. What we do know is that by then his own people had already replaced him.
Then, the night of sorrows. The Spanish try to escape the city at night in the rain, loaded with gold.
And the causeway bridges are down. Men drown because they'd stuffed their armor with treasure and couldn't swim in it.
They lose maybe 2/3 of the Spanish force. Cortés is said to have wept under a tree.
And here's where it should have ended. The Mexica won that battle decisively. They should have won the war.
And what stops them isn't Spanish tactics, it's smallpox.
which arrives with the reinforcements Cortés picked up on the coast, and the population has zero prior exposure, no inherited resistance at all.
It tears through Tenochtitlan for 2.5 months. Estimates suggest it kills a huge share of the city, possibly a third or more.
Including Montezuma's successor, Cuitlahuac, the man who had just beaten the Spanish after 80 days on the throne.
And it kills the people who know things, the priests, the administrators, the commanders. Institutional memory just deleted.
Cortés didn't have to defeat the Mexica state. He had to wait while it was hollowed out and then walk in.
The siege comes in 1521. Cortés builds brigantines, actual ships, and carries them overland in pieces to control the lake.
Which is the smartest thing he ever did. It kills the causeway advantage entirely.
They cut the aqueduct, they blockade the food, and they demolish the city house by house as they advance.
80 days. Cuauhtémoc, the last ruler, surrenders in August 1521. He's tortured for gold and later executed.
And the aftermath is Mexico City built on the rubble, with the cathedral on the temple precinct and the lake drained over centuries.
Sadly, the Tlaxcalans who thought they were buying independence discover what they'd actually joined. Better terms than most. Still subjects.
So, how do we judge Montezuma?
I think the God theory lets everyone off too easily, including us. It makes it mystical instead of political.
My read is that he was a competent, intelligent ruler who made a rational containment decision against an opponent operating outside every rule he'd ever known.
He was playing a game with rules. Embassy, tribute, ritual warfare, capture. Cortés wasn't playing that game and didn't know it existed.
And the deeper failure is older than him. He inherited and intensified a system that extracted from its neighbors without binding them.
Which is fine while you're strong. The moment someone offers those neighbors an alternative, your empire is a list of volunteers for the other side.
An empire held together only by what it takes has no friends on the day it needs them.
This was History But Better Podcast, Episode 3.